There's a country on Earth whose survival depends on machines that can never stop, not even for a moment. A third of this country's land sits below sea level. A massive international airport stands on the floor of what was once a lake, drained in the 19th century, sitting nearly 3.5 meters beneath the level of the sea. And if it weren't for this nation's dikes, dunes, and coastal defenses, roughly 60% of its land would regularly be underwater. On that fragile ground live about 9 million people. That's where a huge share of the country's economy is generated. And here's the terrifying part. If every pump ever shut down, disaster wouldn't take long to begin. Water would start returning to the lowest places. Canals would rise, low-lying fields would flood, and the land people had maintained for centuries would slowly begin losing its balance. And yet, in this impossible place, cities stand tall, crops grow, ports keep running, planes take off and land, and people live their everyday lives as if none of this were unusual. This is the Netherlands, a country that survives because its engineering never sleeps. Today, we will see how a low, waterlogged landscape slowly became one of the most remarkable engineering survival systems on Earth. We will see how the Dutch hold water back, how they remove the water that collects inside, and how canals, pumps, sluices, and windmills work together to keep land below sea level habitable. We will see how they did not simply reclaim land from water, but built cities, farms, ports, and airports on top of it. There is an old saying, God created the world, but the Dutch created the Netherlands. But to understand what that saying really means, we have to go back to a time when this country was not yet the country we know today. It was a low land of marshes, mud, rivers, and territory still ruled by the sea. At that time, the Netherlands was not yet a country of canals, cities, and engineered coastlines. Long before the Great Barriers, electric pumps, and storm gates, this lowland was a flat delta where rivers carried mud and sand toward the North Sea. Soft peat formed beneath wet ground, and the tides could turn the landscape into a temporary world of water. For the first people who lived here, survival did not begin with fighting the sea. It began with learning how to rise above it. They could not stop the floods, so they lifted themselves. Basket by basket, layer by layer, they built artificial dwelling mounds called terps. On these small raised islands, families placed their homes, their animals, their food, and their fire, while the water spread across the lowland around them. Imagine a cold evening 2,000 years ago. A family sits on a man-made mound surrounded by dark water. Below them, the tide moves through the marshes. Above them, smoke rises from a small fire. They are not controlling nature yet. They are simply surviving above it. But living on mounds was only survival. It was not victory. Over time, the Dutch would begin to ask a much bigger question. What if they did not just rise above the water? What if they could hold the water back and turn the wetland itself into a place to live? That question changed everything. About 1,000 years ago, the people of this lowland began to move from escape to defense. Instead of only building higher mounds for their homes, they started building dikes around entire pieces of land. A dike does not protect one man. It protects everyone behind it. And that created a new kind of responsibility. If one farmer neglected his part of the dike, the water would not politely stop at his fence. It could flood his neighbor's house, drown another family's animals, and destroy an entire village overnight. So the Dutch had to learn something deeper than engineering. They had to learn cooperation. Out of that need came the early water boards, local authorities created to inspect dikes, organize repairs, collect money, and force everyone, rich or poor, to do their part against the water. In different forms, these water authorities still exist today. Modern Dutch water management is shared between national organizations like Rijkswaterstaat and regional water authorities that deal with flood prevention, surface water, groundwater, water quality, farmers' water supply, and wastewater. This is one of the hidden reasons the Netherlands survived. The country was not saved only by stone, wood, or concrete. It was saved by discipline. But dikes solved only half of the problem. They could hold back the water outside. But what about the water inside? What about rain, river floods, soaked soil, and the water that kept gathering behind the walls? The answer became the polder. A polder is often described as land reclaimed from water, but that sounds too simple. A polder is not land that was saved once. It is land that has to be rescued every single day. First, the Dutch surrounded a low piece of land with dikes, cutting it off from the sea, rivers, or lakes around it. But the moment the wall was built, a new problem appeared. Rain still fell inside. Rivers still rose. Moisture still seeped through the soil. The water was no longer rushing in from outside, but it was still collecting inside the bowl. So the Dutch built canals to gather it. These canals acted like veins running through the land, carrying unwanted water toward pumping points. Then came the machines that made the entire system possible. Long before electric motors, windmills did much more than grind grain. In the Netherlands, many of them were water machines. Their blades turned in the wind, driving wheels or screws that lifted water from a lower canal into a higher one, step by step, until it could be released beyond the dike. That is the secret of a polder. The land is lower than the water around it, so water cannot simply flow away by itself. It must be lifted. Later, steam engines, diesel engines, and electric pumps replaced the old windmills, but the logic stayed the same. Collect the water, lift the water, move the water out. Then do it again tomorrow. Sluices and gates controlled when water could pass and when it had to be blocked. Canals stored and guided it. Pumps worked like the heartbeat of the land. And the dikes formed the outer skin of the system. Together they turned wet ground into farms, villages, roads, and eventually entire cities. But this machine never truly rests. If the pumps stop, water begins to gather again. If a canal overfills, the land starts to lose its balance. If a gate fails at the wrong moment, the system can be overwhelmed. This is why the Netherlands is not simply built on land. It is built on maintenance. And yet the more perfectly the Dutch learned to dry the land, the more they discovered a strange curse hidden beneath their success. In some places, the drier the ground became, the lower the land began to sink. This is one of the hidden problems of the Netherlands. Water does not always attack like a wave. Sometimes it comes quietly, through the soil, under the dikes, and into the places people thought were protected. In a country like this, fresh water is not just something people drink. It helps keep dikes stable. It feeds farms. It supports nature, industry, shipping, cities, and even parts of the energy system. When there is too little fresh water, the danger changes shape. During dry periods, groundwater can fall. Soft soil and peat can shrink. Foundations can weaken. Roads, houses, and fields can slowly sink. And as the land sinks, the country becomes even more dependent on the pumps and dikes that were built to protect it. Then there is another enemy, salt. The sea does not need to break through a wall to cause damage. Salt water can push into rivers, canals, and underground water systems. If it reaches farmland, it can damage crops. If it reaches freshwater supplies, it becomes a problem for people, agriculture, and nature at the same time. So the Dutch are not only fighting floods, they are managing balance. Too much water can drown the land. Too little fresh water can make the land sink. Salt water can poison the fields. Groundwater can move invisibly beneath the surface. And every pump, every canal, every gate has to work inside that delicate balance. This is where the Netherlands becomes more than a country. It becomes a living machine. Electric pumps need power, gates need signals, canals need space, engineers need forecasts, water authorities need to know when to drain, when to store, when to block, and when to let water move. A broken dike is dramatic. A failed pump room is quieter. But in a country built below sea level, silence can also be dangerous. For centuries, the Dutch fought these invisible enemies with patience, measurement, and constant maintenance. But then came one night when the enemy was no longer hidden. The sea came back in the dark. For centuries, the Dutch had pushed the water back. Then, in one winter night, the sea pushed back harder. On the night of February 1st, 1953, a powerful storm moved across the North Sea at the same time as a high spring tide. The wind drove an enormous mass of water toward the Dutch coast. The sea level rose higher and higher, pressing against dikes that were not ready for a storm of that scale. Then, in the darkness, the defenses began to fail. Water broke through in dozens of places. It rushed into sleeping villages across the southwest of the country. Many people woke up, not to alarms, but to cold water entering their homes. Families climbed to attics, roofs, and any place higher than the rising flood. Outside, the night was chaos. Roads disappeared. Fields became lakes. Telephone lines failed. Some communities were cut off, not knowing whether help was coming or whether the same disaster was happening everywhere around them. For a country that had spent centuries learning how to live with water, this was a brutal reminder. Engineering can reduce risk, but it can never allow people to forget the power of nature. By the time the flood was over, 1,836 people in the Netherlands had lost their lives. Thousands of animals were gone. Homes, farms, and entire communities were damaged or destroyed. The disaster became a national trauma, not only because of the number of lives lost, but because it struck at the deepest belief of the country, the belief that the water could always be controlled. But that night did not leave only destruction behind. It forced the Netherlands to ask a new question. What kind of protection would be strong enough for a country where millions of people lived below the level of the sea? And from that question came a national promise: never again. Out of grief, fear, and engineering determination, the Dutch would build one of the most ambitious flood protection systems the world had ever seen. The answer became the Delta Works. The Delta Works were not just walls against water. They were a national promise, poured into concrete and steel. After the flood of 1953, the Netherlands did not simply repair what had broken. It redesigned the way an entire country would defend itself. Across the southwest, engineers began building a system of dams, sluices, locks, dikes, levees, and storm surge barriers. Built between 1954 and 1997, the Delta Works became so important that the American Society of Civil Engineers later recognized it among the modern wonders of civil engineering. But the goal was simple: make sure that a disaster like 1953 would never happen again. This was not heroic in the way movies often show heroism. There was no single person standing against the sea. The heroes here were the people with maps, calculations, concrete tests, steel gates, weather models, and the patience to think about storms that might not come for generations. One of the greatest pieces of this system is the Oosterscheldekering, the Eastern Scheldt Storm Surge Barrier. It stretches for nearly 9 kilometers. At first, engineers could have closed the sea arm completely with a solid dam. That would have been simpler, but it would also have damaged the tidal ecosystem, the shellfish, the birds, and the living sea behind it. So the Dutch chose a harder solution. They built a movable barrier. In normal weather, the sea can still move in and out. The tide still breathes. Nature is not completely locked away. But when a dangerous storm surge approaches, massive gates can close, turning the open sea arm into a protected wall. Then there is the Maaslandkering, built to protect Rotterdam and one of the most important ports in Europe. A normal dam could not be placed across a shipping route used by ocean-going vessels, so engineers created 2 enormous moving gates, each about 210 meters long. Most of the time, they rest quietly on land. But when forecasts show that the water is rising to a dangerous level, a computer system can begin the closing process. The gates swing out into the water, meet in the middle, fill with water, and sink into position, sealing the route against the sea. This is what makes Dutch engineering so powerful. It is not only about building higher walls. It is about designing systems that know when to open, when to close, when to protect people, and when to let water move. The Delta Works showed the world that survival below sea level is not a miracle. It is planning, maintenance, and prevention on a national scale. But strangely, the most famous story many people know about the Netherlands is not about these engineers, barriers, or machines. It is about a child, a dike, and one finger. And that story is one of the most misunderstood stories ever told about the Dutch fight against water. But before we move into the future, we have to clear away one of the most famous myths about the Netherlands. Many people have heard the story of a little Dutch boy who saw a leak in a dike, put his finger into the hole, and stood there all night to save his country. It is a powerful image, but it is not an ancient Dutch legend. The story became famous through a 19th century American children's book, and over time, many people around the world began to believe it was real Dutch folklore. In truth, if a dike is leaking, a finger will not save it. Water that finds a path will keep pushing, widening the weakness minute by minute. The real heroes were not fairy tale children with fingers and dikes. They were engineers, workers, inspectors, and ordinary people who kept showing up before disaster arrived. There is another hidden truth beneath Dutch cities. Amsterdam is often compared to Venice, but its survival depends on a different kind of hidden engineering beneath the streets. Much of the old city rests on thousands of piles driven deep through soft ground to reach stronger layers below. So the Netherlands is not held together by legends. It is held together by design, discipline, inspection, and maintenance. But today, the biggest question is no longer an old myth. The question's, what happens next as the sea keeps rising? The Netherlands has built some of the strongest water defenses on Earth. But the sea is not defeated. It is measured, watched, delayed, redirected, but never forgotten. Climate change is changing the rules of the old fight. Sea levels are rising. Storms can push more water toward the coast. Rivers can carry higher volumes inland, and heavy rain can overwhelm cities from above, even when the sea itself stays outside the dikes. That is what makes the Dutch challenge so difficult. Water does not come from one direction anymore. It can come from the sea, from the rivers, from the sky, or from beneath the ground. So the question is not only whether the Netherlands can survive the next storm. The real question is whether its entire system can keep adapting for the next century. By 2050, the Dutch aim to make their country more water robust and climate resilient. That means stronger protection, better planning, smarter cities, and a landscape designed to absorb water instead of simply pushing it away. Because the future may not be won by building higher walls forever. In some places, the most advanced Dutch decision was not to fight harder, but to redesign the landscape itself. This is the lesson the Dutch are now teaching the world. For centuries, survival meant pushing water away. Build the dike higher, make the pump stronger, close the gate faster. But in the 21st century, the Netherlands began to understand something more difficult. You cannot keep making every wall higher forever. A higher wall may protect you for a while, but if it fails, the disaster behind it can become even greater. So the Dutch began to change their question. Instead of asking only, how do we stop the water? They also began asking, where can the water safely go? That idea can be seen in projects like Room for the River. In some places, dikes were moved farther inland, floodplains were lowered, side channels were created. Land that people had fought to control for generations was partly given back, so rivers could spread during floods without destroying towns and cities. It sounds like surrender, but it is not. It is strategy. The same thinking appears in modern Dutch cities. Some public squares are designed to become temporary water basins during heavy rain. On dry days, they are places for people. During storms, they become part of the flood system. Floating homes rise and fall with the water instead of fighting against it. Even the coast is being protected in a new way. With the sand motor, the Dutch placed around 21.5 million cubic meters of sand along the shore and allowed wind, waves, and tides to slowly spread it naturally. Instead of forcing nature to obey every day, they let nature do part of the work. This may be the deepest Dutch wisdom. The next victory may not come from building higher walls, but from knowing when to step back and give water a place to go. So the real story of the Netherlands is not only a war against the sea, it is the story of a nation that learned something every engineer must eventually understand. If you do not respect nature, even the best engineering will one day reach its limit. The Dutch did not survive because they defeated the sea once. They survived because they chose to keep working every day, long after the storm was gone. They measure the water, they inspect the dikes, they run the pumps, they repair small weaknesses before they become disasters. They study the future before it arrives. And when nature proves stronger than expected, They do not simply pretend they have won. They adapt. That is what makes the Netherlands extraordinary. Its greatest achievement is not only the land it reclaimed, or the barriers it built, or the cities it raised below sea level. Its greatest achievement is the discipline to keep the system alive. The Netherlands is a country that survives because engineering never sleeps. And maybe that is the real lesson. Humans cannot control nature completely. But with patience, intelligence, unity, and respect, they can learn how to live with it. If this story made you see the Netherlands differently, subscribe to the channel, because this is only one example of how humans reshape the planet to survive.